Hello and welcome to the Blessings in the Streets podcast. I am your host, Joseph B. Roberts, and in studio with me today is a brother that I had the pleasure of connecting with about a month and a half ago. We connected online, and this brother expressed an interest in our podcast here. He liked what we were doing, and so we made connections with each other, talked it out, and here we are today. Finally got it set up to chop it up and learn more about this brother's journey and his story. He's looking to inspire and encourage and uplift others in the sharing of not only his story, but just kind of dropping some gems on what it means to deal with adversity and being able to overcome those adversities without allowing it to dictate, the ending of your story. In other words, taking those moments and using them as opportunities to elevate and become a better version of yourself. This brother is a professional basketball trainer. He's doing skill sets from the fundamental standpoint, bringing it back old school, if you will. He has experience as a player, as a coach, played professionally, played overseas, and he's passionate about pouring into our young people who are having a passion and a desire to play this sport of basketball. And this brother is keeping his hands full, again, just pouring into others, into the lives of young people, and just letting God lead him in a mighty and a magnificent way. So it is my privilege and honor, ladies and gentlemen, to introduce to you my new brother and friend, right, we got with us tonight, Mr. Paris Cherry. Paris, thank you so much, my brother, for being on the show.
Man, Robert, it's a blessing to be here. Thank you for having me. I'm excited to share my story. I think people will be blessed, encouraged, and inspired. Let's get into it.
Sounds good. Sounds good. So before we jump into our segments, I do want to give you an opportunity to kind of give a general introduction about yourself, who you are, where you're from, what you do, kind of give our listeners a taste of who is Paris Cherry.
Yes. So I am originally from Boston, Massachusetts. All right. I currently live in Las Vegas. I am a player development specialist. Like you noted, I train players all the way from elementary and middle school all the way to the NBA level. I did 7 camps in 7 countries in 2023. So pretty well known across the world for helping players get better. That's my passion. Is helping players maximize their basketball abilities and helping them make their dreams come true. As you mentioned, obviously I had a background playing myself, played for East Boston High School, which is one of the best and historically best high school basketball programs in the state. Went on to play at prep school in New Hampshire with a couple of guys who are pretty big in the game of basketball currently. I won't drop any names or anything like that. Played with some really talented guys who are still impactful in the basketball industry today. Then I had the opportunity to walk on at Coppin State University, which is a HBCU, historically Black and Colored University, out in Baltimore, Maryland. All right, one of my favorite places, the DMV area. And then, from there, I went on to play professionally overseas, Dominican Republic, as well as American minor leagues, and found myself getting into training and coaching, starting off volunteering as part of the nonprofit, trying to keep kids in my neighborhood off the street. And through that, God opened the opportunity to make a business and make a living off of that. So prior to the past 10 years, I've been in the training business, and, it's a blessing to get to essentially play basketball and get paid for it. Right? I didn't make the NBA. I got all the way to the G League, but I didn't make it. So it's a blessing to still be able to be in the game. So that's pretty much who I am.
That's awesome, man. That is awesome. Love what you're doing. I have a lot of close friends who, have young men, trying to, play the game of basketball. They have a passion for it, of course, trying to make their mark. Some of them having dreams of, possibly reaching NBA standard levels. And so it's always great to chat with brothers like yourself. But I think what makes what you do so much more special, that kind of stands out, is the fact that, that I mentioned at the top of the show, is that, to my audience, this is a man of God. This is a brother who, he's not just in this thing, it's not just about a money grab. It's about, him being, again, passionate about trying to train up these young men to be able to play at the level, giving them the fundamental foundational basis of what it's going to take, the ethics, the commitment, the discipline, all of those good things. But again, you're doing it from a place where you're foundationally based in God. And I think that makes all the difference in the world. And it sets you apart from many of the others that are out there doing the same type of thing, but don't necessarily always have that element attached to them. So for that, man, I applaud you for that. And And clearly you're doing some great works. I've had a chance to check out some of the things that you've been doing, and I'm pretty impressed, man. That for lack of a better word to saying it, I mean, it's you're doing your thing, man. And there's going to be a lot of young men, and young ladies for that matter, that are going to be blessed by your skills training and development, man. So good stuff, good stuff. So
Man,
yes, go ahead.
two things real quick to piggyback off that. The great thing about basketball, there's a saying that's "ball is life," and there's a lot of truth to that because there's so many life principles that are taught through the game of basketball: teamwork and integrity and hard work and overcoming obstacles, perseverance, dealing with frustration, dealing with losing, listening to authority. So many of those things that are biblical standards, right, can be taught through the game of basketball. And for me, I realized I got to the point when I realized that God gives us all talents, and we ought to use them to glorify Him. So through the game of basketball, as a player, as a coach, as a trainer, the success and the platform that I've been able to establish worldwide, all that does is give me more opportunity to promote Christ, right? More opportunity to promote God and promote His ideals, and be able to reach people like you said that I would not be able to reach without the platform that my talent has given me. So that's the great thing about it.
Love that, man. And again, what you do and the connection to what we're trying to do here on the podcast. The one key word that jumped out at me when you just were giving this last little snippet here was about teaching them about losing. And I don't think you meant that in a way of I want you to embrace, what it means to lose and be okay with being a quote unquote loser. But I think so
Right.
oftentimes, especially in youth sports, and a
Mm.
lot of it, in all honesty, a lot of it is driven by parents who are constantly
Yep.
switching their kid from program to program, to team, trying to create perfect winning situations all the time. And some of them are very, maybe are strategic enough to make it happen. But then I oftentimes sit back and wonder, like, what is that kid going to do? Let's just say that kid makes it to a college team, but for the first
Right.
time, they're on a team that either one, they're not the star on the team, and two, let's just say
Right.
it's a
Right.
team that's rebuilding. It's coming about. So
Right.
you on a team that's going to lose a lot. Are you prepared to handle
Right.
that? Or
Right.
will the first time you lose a couple of games, will you go into a total meltdown and devastation mode, so to speak,
Yeah.
versus what I believe you're trying to do, if specifically in that particular category, is help young people to understand you're going to win some, but you're also going to lose some. How do you bounce back
Mhm.
when you didn't have your best game? How do you bounce back when you're on a team that maybe is not at that level that perhaps you were accustomed to? What can you contribute?
Right.
Can you do to make yourself better as well as to make your team better? So just those principles,
Right.
as well, along with all the other things that you mentioned, I think are so key. So again, it's just a testament to what you're doing, and what I really love about your approach in the skills
Yeah.
training that you're doing for these young people. So good, that's good stuff, man. Good stuff. So
Well, we in the
go ahead.
the NCAA, they have a transfer portal, and the transfer portal is astronomically high. And in fact, probably about 65 of those kids who go into the transfer portal never come out, which means a kid, just like you said, was on a college basketball team this season. He didn't like the situation. He's used to jumping from team to team, right? Because that's how he was raised in the game. They put themselves in a transfer portal, and no other college picks them up, and now they effectively ended their college career. So there's real time consequences when these things are not taught. And I tell all the kids I work with, I said, listen, if you make it in basketball, great. If you don't, you still have value. Your parents love you, God loves you, I love you, right? Figure out what God has intended for your life. And if it is basketball, figure out early that even if it is basketball, it's not about glorifying you, it's about glorifying yourself. Because if you focus on glorifying you, unless you're that one of those 1% type of guys, those LeBrons and Kobe's and those 1% high level athletes, you're going to have some problems. Not only obviously there's a spiritual component, but we know everything from above affects below, right? So we're trying to help these kids have success in the game by teaching them spiritual principles.
Love that. Love that. Absolutely. So, hey, man, when we talk about our stories, our journeys in life, I'm a firm believer that in order to fully capture the true essence of one's story, one's journey, it is very important that we go back to where it all starts. And so that's exactly what I want to do with you in the sharing of your story. So if you would kind of reflect back, growing up, you said you're originally from Boston, the Boston area. Kind of tell us, what was it like for you coming up as a kid? Fond memories that you have about coming up as a kid, as well as if there are some challenges that you had to deal with along the way that impacted, your life. Feel free to share those as well. Kind of give us that foundational basis of where your story starts.
Yeah, man. Well, my story is unique. I started off down 100 in the game, so to speak. My mother was addicted to alcohol. She ended up passing away when I was 4 years old due to alcohol abuse. I was actually taken away from my mother at 6 months old because she couldn't take care of me. She went out partying and would leave me literally at home. Up to 6 months old by myself. My father had a drug addiction. He was running the streets. So at 6 months old, my grandparents on my father's side took me in so that the state wouldn't take me and put me into a foster home. And by the time I was 4, they were my guardians. But I essentially started life without my parents. Obviously my mother was dead and my father was, essentially in jail for the majority of my childhood. I obviously started the game off, in a deficit. I grew up, my grandparents, I grew up in a stable home. My grandfather worked, he painted cars, he went to work every single day, rain, sleet, hail, or snow. And if you know anything about growing up in Boston, to say that you're going to work every day, rain, sleet, hail, or snow, that means you're doing some serious stuff to get there every day. That's for sure. But we lived in the hood. We didn't live in poverty. However, many people around us lived in poverty. So I grew up, around, a lot of gang. There was a gang. There was gang. Our street was a gang street, a pretty notorious one at that. So there was things that happened on the street. The guys in the gang lived directly across the street from me, so I would see them hanging out, selling drugs. Times people would come and shoot at them, and they'd shoot back. And in fact, I'll get to this more into this, but in fact, my grandfather was shot in front of my house when I was about 20 years old, in the midst of this gang stuff. So, growing up in that environment, on the outside, and then on the inside, I had a dynamic of my grandmother who wanted me because she could never have a child herself. And we have my grandfather who raised my father, and seeing how my father turned out in his old age, he's like, well, why do I, going in my 50s, need to take care of, this guy's child who, I took care of him and he couldn't get his stuff together. So I was raised in a dynamic where, I was wanted by one and really wasn't wanted by the other. So there was a lot of, um, there was a lot of emotional turmoil that I dealt with. Not having my parents, stuff that was going on at home, stuff that was going on outside. My not having a lot of friends because of the generational gap, of my grandparents. Obviously, their friends, kids are, adults. So I was kind of an only child, kind of a loner. Dealt with a lot of depression and anger, and anxiety. Would get in trouble in school. In elementary school, when we was sent to counseling and all those things. The early years were pretty tough. But probably around the 5th and 6th grade, I was introduced to the game of basketball. And it was funny. It was introduced as a way for me to make friends. So my grandmother, my grandparents, they had money, and so they bought me this nice basketball hoop in my backyard. And it was paved, and nice little setup. But I was by myself. Now on the next street over, you could see through the fence there was this group of kids from the next street over, and they were playing in the backyard, and they was playing on a crate. Mm-hmm. You see what I'm saying? They had a crate attached to the garage. So I'm looking at them, like, man, I need some friends, and they looking at me like we need to get off this crate. and go play on the real roof. And so, eventually we became friends, and they would come and play. But they were a little bit older than me. They had been playing more than me. So at first I wasn't no good. So they'd come over and play on my hoop and wouldn't let me play. And it was very devastating, right? So, to be 10 or 11 years old, you won't even get picked in your own court. And, my grandparents were really never really supportive of me. So, I go try to them, and they just really, were pretty indifferent. They was like, well, just don't play with them. Like, that's not the answer, right? Like, we got to figure something out. But what it did is it traded a chip on my shoulder. And I said, I don't like this feeling of not being picked. So I'm going to get good enough where that would never happen again. So, probably between 10 and 11 to about 12, 13, I went from the worst player to, probably the best player. I had one of my friends, he was about 4 years older than me. So he was about 17. I was about 13. He was the last one left. But by the time I was 15, he was 19. I was better than he was. So I developed a work ethic. I developed a chip on my shoulder, because even as I got better and I started really excelling, I'll say my grandmother went to one high school basketball game. My grandfather never seen me play, wouldn't come. And so it's tough when no one's cheering for you. No one is really ever cheering for you, no matter how good you are. So I had a lot of complex, through that and feeling rejected. Right? It's a series of rejections. Your mother dying, your father in jail, stuff that's going on at home, and then because you don't have any support, you're competing against a whole bunch of other people who got a whole bunch of support. Right? So you could be as good as them, as better than them. But the how it plays out, right? If no one's cheering for you, it's kind of like, how good are you? And I had to deal with those things. So despite of those things, I was actually had an opportunity. Well, I ended up playing. I ended up actually getting in trouble my junior year. It was on my birthday. My best friend from my neighborhood had got killed the summer before. And it was a really tragic situation. And, I was about 17 years old, and I had a little bit of freedom. They say your balls drop, that type of thing, right? A lot of things was going on. So it was my birthday, and me and one of my teammates, we were drinking, and something happened and got into it with a teacher on the way out. I was drunk, and I don't know, started talking crazy to him, threatening him, and essentially I got kicked out of school. So at that point, I'm 17 years old, about to turn 18. My father had just got out of jail, and he was living in New Hampshire, which was about 45 minutes from Boston. So my grandmother was like, pretty much, you need to go stay with your father, and you're out of control. You need to go stay with your father. I didn't know my father, but as I'd be thrown into a young man. You always want to get to know your father, right? You know what I'm saying? Good or bad, right? I need to know him for myself so I can know me. So I went to live with him, and I was given all the freedom in the world, probably way too much freedom. We partying girls, we drinking, we smoking weed, and all the while, I had got picked up by the top prep school team in New Hampshire. I was playing basketball at the Y, and I was killing everybody. And this young man came up to me. His name is Chris Brickley, if you look him up, he's probably the most famous NBA trainer in the world today. He's the only trainer in the world with a sneaker deal. But he was
Mm-hmm.
he was a freshman, a little kid in New Hampshire, and he saw me and he thought I was the greatest player in the world. And he told his coaches about me, and I got picked up to school. So I'm playing for this private school, number one ranked player in the state of New Hampshire my senior year. But my home life is a complete wreck. Pretty much everybody knows it. My father, and he's got a little young girlfriend, probably about 4 or 5 years older than I was at the time, and she was pretty wild. He was pretty wild. It's a small town in Manchester, New Hampshire. So they were pretty well known in the street for being wild. And you add that with me being the number one basketball player in the state. You can probably imagine that things got didn't go too well. Me and him ended up getting into a fight because he was beating up on his girlfriend. Police came. He said I hit him. Ended up going to jail. Front page of the sports section, #1 ranked player arrested in domestic dispute. And I had multiple Division I offers that pretty much went down the drain at that point. Um, I was able to. I had to go back home to Boston, and I was blessed enough. While I was working a job. I mean, I was I was running the streets selling some weed, but I always worked. Right, I had a job since I was 13. I would always go get a job. And so I was working this job, and I met this gentleman who had just came to Boston to go to graduate school. He was out from. He's actually from Cali, but he graduated from Howard University. And he took a liking to me. Saw I was young and a little, but had some potential. And I told him about me, and I say I used to play ball and blah blah blah. And at that time, I wasn't even really thinking about basketball at that point. And I guess he looked me up and was like, he came back to work one day and said, "Listen, young man," he's like, "I looked you up, man." He was like, you are truly cheating yourself by not to continue to pursue basketball. He was like, "Listen, I can get you into college." He was like, "I get you into school back in Maryland." So I was originally going to go to Howard, right? But then he was like, "Man," he's like, "I'm gonna be honest with you. You don't need to go to Howard because you got a problem with the female." And Howard is well known for the beautiful black women. So he's like, "I'm gonna send you down to Coppin State, a little bit smaller school. You'll probably stay a little bit more focused." So that's what I did. And that kind of breaks down my early years. Like I said, a lot of problems. But God was gracious enough to give me a love for basketball that made a way for me despite of all those challenges. Some many that weren't my fault and some that were. So that was God's setting the direction of my life through those things, and even orchestrating me being kicked out of school in Boston and having to go stay with my father. And the relationship with me and my father, we'll get more into it later on as we get into it. But even going up there to play, it just really allowed me to continue to be around the best of the best. Even in high school in Boston, the other guard in the backcourt, he got drafted by the Detroit Pistons. I was able to, even though I didn't come from the pedigree or have the support, I always ended up among the best coaches, the best players, the best teams. And when I look back at now and considering that you talked earlier about how parents try to strategize and orchestrate and position their kids, and knowing that my parents literally did nothing. My grandparents didn't do anything, but God did orchestration.
Mm-hmm.
God did the strategizing and just placed me. So looking back, I many times I'm amazed. I'm like, man, how did I get through and get to these places?
Exactly, man. Well, first off, let me say that I appreciate your transparency and sharing your story. The beginning part of your story here, because like you stated, if you would have told somebody just generically these type of situations and circumstances that took place in the life of a young black man growing up in the hood, they would have never imagined that the outcome from that would have been some of the things that have taken place for you. So that's how that God's hands was all over that. You're not supposed to come from a broken home where your parents weren't there. Yes, your grandparents took you in, but they weren't really vested in things that you were passionate about. You didn't, like you said, you didn't have that support. I'm sure you were thankful that you had somebody to take you in versus going into the system, but nevertheless, you felt that sense of loneliness. You felt that sense of, just kind of being out here against the world by yourself as a young man. And then, like I said, you run into some trouble in high school, get kicked out of school after being top player. Again, we've seen that storyline before, and it usually doesn't end well. But then of all the places that you end up getting, positioned in, grandparents say, "Hey, you got to go." And now I'm going to live with my dad, who I really have no relationship with, not been around. And by the way, by chance, and I'm saying that loosely, by chance, you just happen to meet somebody who who
Yeah.
checks you out, who takes a liking to you, who looks you up, and next thing you know, you're in a prep school, and you're number one player in the state, and then then you get into some more stuff, and then next thing you know, somebody else takes a liking to you and says, "Oh, I want you to go to college." And then they didn't just say, they were very specific about what college to go to. And I like the fact that the gentleman who connected with you understood what one of your struggles were. He's saying, hey, you like the ladies. I'm not going to send you to this school because that's going to be too much for you. You need to go to a smaller school. And that's a whole nother conversation in itself, because a lot of times, depending upon what you're used to, whether it's a challenge that you have or perhaps an experience that you've never had, sometimes smaller school environments are better. So that person, just to have the insight to know, hey, this is what you need to do. So all of these things that you spoke of just in the first part of your story, I think, while they may be trying, and I'm sure they didn't always feel good to you in the moment, when I think about what you're doing today versus, and I connect those dots to what you went through in your early years of coming up, it's like you had to go through that to even position yourself to be where you are right now. Who better to be able to connect with young people? I'm sure many of them that you are connecting with right now, that you're developing and training, perhaps come from inner cities, neighborhoods, perhaps come from single parent homes, perhaps might have even come on your court, having some baggage with them, whether it's in school or other disciplinary problems. Who better to coach me that not only knows the game, but knows the life of what that's like? And the mistakes that you can fall, if you're not careful, mistakes that can just end it all for you, but you're now able to speak to that and give them hope that even though you might have fallen short, you might have had some mistakes here, you might have had some setbacks, that's not the end of your story. Look at me. I had all of that happen, but here I am teaching you this game of basketball. Here I am being able to share some experiences with you of things that I was able to do, traveling all over the world, doing all kind of stuff. That's not how that ending was supposed to go if you look at it from a worldly perspective. But when you're looking at it through the lens of how God sets it up, then this makes total sense, because God is in the mix of it all. So that's, just even in the early going of your story, man, you're already dropping gems, and you're already reemphasizing the point of why it's so important to have that relationship with God and understand how he can move you through the series of storms in life, and how those storms can become actual opportunities for you to elevate, for you to grow, for you to develop, for you to truly find what your purpose is. So that's good stuff, man, that you shared there. So key. So Parrish, obviously, we talk about you talked about that upbringing. You're now venturing off into adulthood, and just as with any adult, you're going to experience, not only just life experiences in general, but what comes with coming into adulthood, a lot of times, if it hasn't already started to happen for people in their younger years, is that you're going to also become acquainted with a series of different life storms. And some of those storms that come your way are going to be a little bit extensive, intense, if you will, to the point to where sometimes you might find yourself in the midst of those type of storms, and you find yourself questioning, like, okay, what am I in, and how am I going to possibly get out of this? I mean, even if you're somebody who's naturally been good at maneuvering through, or your track record has always shown that I've been able to get through some stuff, but now here I am hit with a situation, hit with a circumstance that, I can't throw no money at this. I can't make a phone call to get out of this. This is something that the weight of it is such that I'm doubting, I'm questioning, even if I'm a man of faith, I'm doubting, I'm fearful, like, how am I going to come up out of this thing? So with that said, tell us about a time when you found yourself in that type of situation where you didn't see a way out at that moment. You didn't know what you were going to do. This was bigger than you. This was something that you doubted. You had questions. You had fears. You had some concerns. Obviously, you're here today, so I'm just trusting that God led you through whatever the story is that you're about to share with us. But nevertheless, at that time, you might have not seen that way out. So if you would kind of walk us through what that situation was like for you, and what was that turning point where you began to see a little light at the end of the tunnel, where you were coming up out of the situation that you're about to share with us.
No, for sure. I'm gonna share two scenarios with you because I think they connect. And it, goes back to, you said at the beginning of the show, teaching young people how to deal with losing. All right, these two situations that I'm gonna get into are two situations where essentially I lost. Right. for all intents and purposes, when you look at it from a physical standpoint. But I'm going to also show that spiritually how I won in both these circumstances as well. The first situation, one of the two hardest things I ever dealt with was being estranged from my 9-year-old daughter.
Mm.
And me and her mother were together for about 4 years. When I met her, she had a 1-year-old son. She wasn't letting his father be in his life. However, at the point, I thought that he didn't want to be in a child's life, but we find that how things are later on. But anyway, I took him on. I had raised him. When he was about 3, she got pregnant with my daughter, Alea, and I raised her for about a year. However, the entire relationship was extremely toxic. She came from a very difficult family background. Her mother was killed in a domestic situation. Had a bunch of brothers and sisters. And when the mother died, everyone kind of went to the left, kind of opened a Pandora's box of all types of behaviors. And, it was a constant struggle trying to get her to, live according to the values that I believe in versus the values that her family believed in. And things, it was the most stressful part of my life. Simultaneously, while I was dealing with that, I was doing a lot of stuff in the community in Boston, involved with the churches and politics, and that's a whole nother podcast. I think, but there was a lot of stuff going on. I actually had 2 kids in my program that was killed in the same summer. So I was dealing with it again on the inside and the outside, which led to a situation where the relationship got so bad, she wanted me gone. So she called the police and said I hit her when I didn't hit her. And by the grace of God, I was able to get out the scene before the police came, because had I not got out the scene, everything else that happened in my life since then probably wouldn't have occurred, and probably wouldn't be on this podcast with you. So I got away, and I had to make a choice at that point. The choice was stay there, uh, risk going to jail, risk, I was fighting, I was dealing with her family, getting threats. I mean, it was a situation where I was like, I'm going to go to jail. I'm going to get hurt. There's nothing good that can be salvaged in the situation. So I had to make a decision. Do I leave and preserve myself and my life and what God has planned for me? Do I stay and try to be there for my daughter? So that was the hardest decision in my life, was to leave my daughter. And I remember I got on an Amtrak train. I was on the train for 24 hours, all the way to Indiana. And I took a bus from Indiana to Louisville. And I restarted my life from there. And from there, I was still training. I rebuilt my training business, ended up getting a coaching job at a Christian high school. That was in 2017. And my life just continued to just grow in leaps and bounds since I left Boston. But I also understand that my success has come with a price. My success, because I've been so successful, that only kind of further strained the relationship with her mother, because she's still in Boston, living how she's living. And I'm on TV and on Instagram and in 7 different countries, and so she's not happy of how my life turned out versus hers. So her way of having some type of something to stand on, I guess, is to keep me from any type of relationship with my daughter. Can't talk to her, can't call her, can't see her. Don't know what's going on with her. So that was a situation that I lost. Considering that I didn't have my parents in my life, to not have my daughter in my life is just really it's embarrassing. It's sad. It's tragic. And I would ask God. I said, God, knowing the circumstances that I came from, why would you allow that to occur? But a lot of times when we're not whole, right, we get into these circumstances and relationships that's not of God. And when things go crazy, I could sit here and talk bad about my daughter's mother, but the reality is I chose her to be my daughter's mother. Ain't nothing going to change that. And that's a choice that I made. And there was plenty of warning signs to exit opportunities that I had even before she was born, that I refused to listen to. There's a consequence of unequally yokedness, and I've suffered from that. But I have to trust that God will make that right in His own time. But God also showed me that, you think about in the Bible when God asked Abraham to sacrifice Isaac, and it was a test. He never intended for him to kill Isaac, but he wanted to see how committed to God and what God had him to do he was. And if it meant killing your own child to do what God would have you to do, are you going to do it? If it meant not having a relationship with your daughter for the first 10 or so years of her life, for you to be able to have the impact on other people's sons and daughters that I ordained you to do it, is it worth it? A lot of times we say, God used me, and they talk about bearing the cross, but we forget the cross was an instrument of torture and of death. So if you want to be like Jesus, then you got to be willing to sacrifice. And what are you willing to sacrifice to follow God's lead in your life? So even though I lost, I count that as a win, not so much for me, but for God's divine purpose for my life. And I've been faithful, and I know I've been able to impact a lot of other people's sons and daughters. And I trust and believe that God has a scoreboard in heaven, right, where those other lives that I've been able to impact was marked down, and that at some point that He will give me the relationship with my daughter, and He'll make up for the lost time. And I truly believe that, and I hold on to that. I've been able to get through that with that hope, right, and in that trust. That was one circumstance, and then the other harder circumstance. I think they're connected because we're talking about relationships with family, right? And many times, even the Bible talks about your enemies may be from your own household. And how do you deal with that, right? It talks about your mother and your father may forsake you, and I literally lived that. But you come to find that God won't forsake you. And so this circumstance is the relationship I have with my father. It's always I talked about the situation that happened when I was in the prep school, and because he was my father, I always wanted to try to forgive him because he's still your father. No matter how jacked up and messed up he is, that's still your father. And at various different points in my life, I let him back into my life to my own detriment. I let him back in again years later. What ended with him trying to rob me in a high stupor at knife point for money. And then I let him actually, when my grandmother died in 2011, I let him move in. I basically begged my grandfather to let him move in because he had got a job in Boston. It was a pretty good job, better than the job any job you get up in New Hampshire. And I said, well, he can move into the downstairs apartment. And my grandmother had written him off a long time ago. So when she was alive, he was person non grata. Grandfather relationship was a little bit less strained. Still had to convince my grandfather. My father said, I'll give him some money. My grandfather, he was pretty shallow, and he liked to drink and smoke. So he said, you give me some money for my alcohol and weed and all that, you can come. So he moved in, and that was probably one of the biggest mistakes of my life because, he moved in. I lived in Boston for a while, but then when I moved to Louisville, I was in Louisville for about 4.5 years. I lived in Houston for 2 years, been in Vegas for about 4 months now. So I haven't been home in quite some time. My grandfather starts to get old, starts to get sick. My father's there, taking care of him, which, is great because with how my life was moving, I didn't have time. I had to, do what God had me to do. And my grandfather died in December of 2022. And now the whole time growing up, and I told you my grandparents, they had money. And they had wrote a will when I was about 4 years old that when they die, the house and everything would go to me. And that was pretty much standard. It was always talked about. They told me what a will was in a safe deposit box. Even after my grandfather died, my grandmother died. Me and my grandfather had conversations about it. But so my grandfather dies, and lo and behold, speak to my father, and he has created a will stating that everything goes to him, $500,000 worth of stuff. And he made it. He was so threatening that he said if I come to Boston and try to get the original will out the safe deposit box, he was going to kill me. So with all that, I had to make a decision to not even go to my grandfather's funeral because I just could not risk some type of situation occurring with all that I had going. I was actually coaching for a college team in Houston. So I was a college coach so how would that look if I go back home and something happens? That job would be in jeopardy big time. So, I had to suck it up and not go back home and had to lawyer up. And so at first he didn't have a lawyer. So I paid a pretty some good amount of money for a lawyer in Boston. And she was just not really good at her job. God bless her. And she didn't file the appropriate paperwork. By that time, my father's very intelligent. He's a criminal, very, very reprobate, but very intelligent guy. He used to be in the military. So he went to the VA and got himself this Harvard-trained lawyer. At that point, I was pretty much all ran out of money. So now I don't have a lawyer. Now he's got the Harvard lawyer. But I said, you know what? I'm pretty smart. I'll go head to head with this Harvard lawyer, which I did for about 6 to 8 months. We're going back and forth. Now, just to kind of back it up, every single day since my grandfather died, my father would text me. And he would say some of the most outrageous stuff. I'm talking about, you need to kill yourself. Your mother was a crack whore. Nobody wanted you. You was a crack baby. I'm not your real dad. Your real dad was a pedophile. Stuff that you wouldn't even say to your worst enemy. He then went and got a restraining order and criminal charges filed against me in Boston, so I wouldn't be, just to make sure I wasn't going to come and get that will in a safe deposit box because I was the only person who had the key to it. And it was actually locked in a safe in the house, which I had the code for. And he knew if I got to it, his whole story was over. So pretty much for a year, I was going to block him, but I said, you know what, I would let him talk crazy to me and then, screenshot it and, put it in the legal file, and to show what was going on. To make a long story short, he had everybody in all types of drug addicts and alcoholics in the neighborhood trying to come in and confirm his story. And it got to the point where we were going to go right before the trial. We had a settlement hearing. It was me and his lawyer. And his lawyer was like, listen, if you go to trial and you lose, we're going to file a stipulation that allows me to charge you for all his legal bills, which right now is at $300,000. So my first response was, hey, you know what? All right, bet. All right, we're going to go to court. All right, I'm not scared. I'm not, whatever. But at that point, it was funny because I hung up the phone. I was like, all right, see you in court. I hung up the phone and I'm sitting there and I'm angry. And God was like, it was like something went off. And God said, let him have it. I said, what? He said, let him have it and you'll be free. I called the lawyer back up. The lawyer was like, oh, did we get disconnected? I didn't know what happened. Yeah. I said, the phone line went out or something. Whatever. I said, listen, what you offering for a settlement? He said $10,000. So mind you, $500,000 on the line. He's offering me $10,000. I said, all right, cool, we good. I immediately got off the phone with him, and God said, text your father. I'm going to tell you what to say. I texted him. I said, you know what, Dad? I'm going to let you have this money. Let me explain a couple of things. Number one, if I win, I was going to put you out without a doubt. And you were going to spend the rest of your life homeless, probably strung out, jacked up, right? If you win, I continue to live the life that I live. I continue to go to different countries. I get to play basketball every day. I drive a nice luxury vehicle. My life is not going to change from the standard of living I'm at if you win. So I said, it's obvious that you need this more than I do. And I said, but above everything, I said, I want to let you know that my soul is worth more than $500,000. So you can have it, but now your beef is not with me, but now your beef is with God. And that was that. They're supposed to sell the house tomorrow. They're closing on it, and I'm supposed to get my money in a couple of days. And when God said I could be free, is that the moment that house is sold, his number's coming off my phone, is being blocked and deleted, and I will never talk to him again. And I'm not saying that out of anger, and I'm not saying that out of spite, and I'm not saying that everybody in a situation with their parents to do the same thing. But what God said is I am setting you free from that whole childhood, that whole negative experience that I described at the beginning, and all the challenges that came from it, all the wounds that God had to heal, all the deprogramming I had to go through. Your grandmother's gone, your grandfather's gone, and then once this house is sold, it's over, and all that is done. And God said, in order for me to move you into the greatness and the stage that I have for you now, all that has to be completely closed. And if it means that I would have to walk away from $500,000 in order for that to be closed, then I realized that's what I needed to do. And when I did that, I felt so much power. Like just talking about it amps me up, because it's real. It showed me that there's nothing that the world can hold over me that's going to make me compromise my soul and spirit to get it. And if it means that I have to lose to win, then I'll lose, because I truly believe that God is going to allow me to see $500,000. And in the next 3 years, I have the skills and the talent, and God will give me the opportunity to make that. So why do I need to sell my soul to get that? Let him have it. But if that's the price of your child, you got it.
Wow.
You got it.
Man, again.
Two situations where the world would say I lost, God said I won.
Absolutely. Like I said, again, man, thank you for your transparency and sharing that. Because like you said, you just reemphasized the fact that, a worldly loss and is completely different than, how we look at loss from godly perspective. When God is on your side, when you're in relationship with him, what even an L in the world is a win with God. I don't know if you paid attention to the title of our show today. Our show is From Man's Rejection to God's Protection. Yes. You are a man from early childhood who has experienced one rejection after another. But even in the midst of all that rejection, God's protection has been there, one after another. That protection has never left you. It's the reason why, as you said earlier, it's the reason why you're even here today to even share the story. Because without God's protection, who knows where you would be? Yes. Who knows if you would still be? If your life would have come to an end, whether it's, the end from somebody else or you ending it yourself. Just from all of the devastation and the trauma that you've been through. So God's protection is so much are very much a real thing. And I love the fact that when you shared about how, God spoke to me and said, you know what, you know, walk away from that, let that go, because God does that sometimes. Sometimes, and again, when you're looking at it through worldly eyes, some people would say that's crazy. Why would you leave that on the table? Why would you walk away from that? Whether it's the money or whether it's the title or whether it's the prestige or whatever. But there's something about peace of mind. There's something about that freedom that you spoke to, that you can't put a price on it. And so, yeah, it would have been nice to have, who wouldn't want to have a $500,000 worth of whatever? The average person would love to have that. But you said, hey, it wasn't worth me losing my soul. It wasn't worth me losing my peace of mind. So you opened your ears, you opened your eyes, you allowed yourself to be poured into from God, and you followed his lead and you trusted him, understanding that if if he's protected me throughout all I've been through up to this point, then what reason do I have to believe that he won't continue to do that? You spoke about who's to say that in a year or two or a few years from now, I won't make that $500,000 back and then some. Would it have been worth it for my peace, for my freedom? Absolutely, it would be worth it for that. You did everything that you could to try to establish a relationship with your dad, despite all the turmoil, despite all the challenges. You did what you could, and that's all that could be expected for you to do. And I love the fact that you, even in the midst of all of what your dad was saying to you and doing to you, I never heard you speak in a way that you spoke badly of him. It was like instead you actually said, he's still my dad. Even with all of his faults, even with all his shortcomings, he's still my dad. I tried. I did what I could. It didn't work out. He's made it clear that he doesn't want a relationship with me. He made it clear that this money is more important than me. And that's fine. And that's not even to say that things can't change. I mean, there's always a possibility of that. But the fact that you didn't allow yourself to be bound by chasing a dollar or chasing, again, or feeling the need to have to be right, or to have to, I'm going to get you back because you got me. Because a lot of times we get caught up in that, where somebody wrongs us and the first natural reaction for us to do is we want to pay you back. But, as the Bible teaches us, vengeance is mine, says the Lord. It's not our place to be the one per se to punish. Let God handle that. When you turn that money over, you said, you said just a moment ago, you was like, Dad, this is now between you and God. You wanted this, have at it. You and God had that conversation. You all deal with that. I'm getting ready to move on with my life. I'm getting ready to continue to walk in the purpose that I believe God has for me. And that's what I'm going to do. And I'm just going to trust God's guidance, his direction. And if it leads to some prosperity along the way, so be it. But even if it doesn't, I'm okay with that because I'm free. Yeah. I have that freedom. I have my peace. And that, again, that is priceless. And then the other thing too, of course, you shared obviously about the situation with you and your daughter. And it's unfortunate because your story, as much as I would love to say that your story is unique, sadly to say it's not. There are many dads that are out here right now that genuinely want to have a relationship with their kid or kids. And because you and the dad and the mom didn't work out, that we have some moms out here, not all moms, but there are some moms out here who are preventing a relationship from happening. Like, it's like, I want to punish you. You can't see your kid. You can't talk to him. You can't do this. Or sometimes it gets into well, I'll let you talk to him as long as you give me this amount of money, or as long as you do this, or as long as you do that. And that's so unfortunate. So for anybody, any of my listeners to today's podcast, if you are in that situation, whether you're the mom in this situation, or even, because sometimes dads are guilty of it too, but if you're in that situation where you're blocking a relationship with that parent just simply because the two parents who created this child, that you're no longer a couple, it's okay for you all to not be an item anymore. But for the sake of the child, for the benefit of the child, for what's best for that child, don't prevent that relationship from happening, especially when you have a willing parent that wants to to have that relationship. Yes, there's some certain responsibilities that go with that. It's not just the relationship. You don't want that parent to just say, I just want to hang out and have fun with my kid. That's part of it. There's still a financial responsibility. There's still
Right.
other things that come into play. But to just take a stance that I don't like you no more. We didn't work out, so now I'm going to use the kid as, as a a thing to dangle in front of you. You're doing more harm to that child
Right.
than you could ever do to the person
Man.
that you was once in
Man.
a relationship with, and it's just so unfortunate. But
Mhm.
I even in the midst of all of that, I love the fact that you are again still trusting in God to say, you know what, Lord, this was a difficult decision for me to make, to step away, knowing what the consequences could have been, on how it could have impacted a lot of different areas. But at the same time, you're trusting and believing that God will, in His appointed time, in His appointed moment, that He's going to make a breakthrough happen where you're going to be able to reconnect with your daughter. And we're just going to claim that victory right now, that that day will come, that you'll have that opportunity to reconnect with your daughter, and that you all will be able to have that conversation one day when she asks you where you been, and you'll be able to not so much bash mom,
Right.
but to just be able to say, hey, things didn't work out.
Right.
Some situations came into play. You've always been on my heart. I've always wanted nothing but the best for you, and I'm glad that God finally saw a way for us to get
Yeah.
reconnected and to build that relationship, because it's never too late. But nevertheless,
Never
it's
too
just
late.
an unfortunate situation, and there's a lot of parents, particularly dads, a lot of times are the ones that fall victim to that situation. Where, please, ladies, don't do that to those dads. And again, for the dads who are doing that, playing that game, don't do that to the mom either. Don't do that, because it harms the kids in the
Yeah.
end. So yeah, man, that's I appreciate you sharing that. I appreciate you doing that. Um, so when you do find yourself, I'm just curious to know, Paris, when you do find yourself facing adversity, again, you've shared some pretty heavy stuff, but we know that all storms aren't going to always be heavy like that. Sometimes it's minor stuff, but nevertheless, it's a moment of
Right.
adversity, a moment of challenge. What I'm curious to know from you is, what is it that you like to do? What is sort of your routine or your regiment that you like to follow when, if today is just one of those days that you got a challenge before you got an obstacle, some moment of adversity to overcome? What is it that you like to do, the process
Yeah.
that you like to go through, that kind of helps you to stay locked in and focused, but still be able to work through whatever that challenge is that you're up against?
Man, it sounds cliche, man, but you gotta go and sit down and talk to God and figure out what's the message that He's trying to give through it. And it's just been that faith that God loves you enough that even when bad things happen, it's all going to work for your good. So when you have that foundational faith, even when tough times come, even when you feel like you feel hopeless, you still, as long as you have a mustard seed of faith, right? A mustard seed is just small. As long as you have that small faith that you can hold on to, it gets you through. And again, just knowing God, right? And just getting to a point of your life where you're at peace with whatever He allows, because anything that happens, He allows it.
Mm-hmm.
He's either allowed it or orchestrated. So just resting in that. That's my de facto go to get through anything. It's just trusting that God is who He is, and He's going to do what He's going to do. And when you look back at my life, for me to doubt God
Mm.
after all He's done in my life, man, it's crazy. If anyone hears my story and don't believe in God after hearing this, I mean, I don't know what to tell you. But my life is as big evidence as you can see that He is good, and He is real, and He holds the world in His hands.
Love that, man. I love the fact that you point out how, because sometimes we forget this. We'll be facing a moment of adversity. We'll be facing a moment of challenge. One of the first things that you can do, or that you should do, is think back to what He's already done. What has He delivered me from before? And like you said, when I think back to all the things that He's gotten me through, some of the most craziest, unbelievable, if you will, challenges and circumstances. And here I am today facing another moment of adversity, facing another challenge. I can rest just in the fact of what His track record has shown, that He's been there for me. So I already know I should go into that
Yeah,
with confidence,
yeah,
with the faith, with the belief, the understanding that no matter what I'm going to be up against from this point moving forward, if He's never let me down before, why should I be thinking that He's going to let me down now. And what I might be dealing with right
man,
now may not even be but a fraction of some of the crazy stuff that I've had to deal with. So if he handled that crazy stuff, I know this is
man,
trivial.
man,
So what I need to do is just
man,
rest in that faith, like you
man.
said, have that faith of a mustard seed, lock in, and just have that conversation with him. Just keep it real. Lord, this is what I'm up against. XYZ is going on. I'm not sure how to work through
Mhm.
that. Pour into me. Give me the words to say.
Yeah,
Give me the steps to take. What should I do? And then you sit back and you
yeah,
allow God to give you his answer. And then once he's given you that, you don't
yeah,
question it, even if it sounds crazy to you. If it doesn't fully make
yep,
sense to you, it wasn't what you thought he was going to say. Don't worry about that because it's the source who's giving you the
right,
response. His track record is flawless. He's got a perfect record. So why not go with
wow,
the one who's got the perfect record?
wow,
If we talk about jumping teams, this is a team that when you jump to this
man.
team, this is a team you want to stay on. They're gonna always be undefeated,
We're
So
gonna win on
Team God is
every.
undefeated. So yes. So he tells me what to do, then I can just go ahead and take those steps accordingly and know that in the appointed time, in the appointed moment, in the appointed way that he's designated for it to all work out, is going to work out and I'm going to be okay. Just like I was the 10 times, the 100 times, the 1,000 times before, I'm going to be just fine. And so that approach, while you said
Man,
it may sound cliche, it may
man,
sound simple, but it is that simple when you understand who God is. That's what makes it simple. That's what makes it an easy choice
man,
to do. It's only when you start trying to
man,
figure out all your problems and all your challenges on your own, where you're not consulting him, where you're just trying to just do your own
hmm,
thing. That's when you get yourself caught up into possibly stumbling and fumbling and making mistakes or making things worse than what they had to be. So that's great stuff. Great stuff, man.
yes,
So
yes, yes, yes,
so
yes,
Paris, if you had an opportunity, thinking about reflecting back on everything that you've experienced in life, everything that you've gone through, good and bad, up and down, high and low. If you had a chance to speak to the younger version of yourself, or just if there's somebody that's listening that is currently dealing with or having challenges with some of the things that you've had to experience, what would be your words of encouragement, your words of inspiration that you would have to offer that you believe are key things that if those individuals listening in right now would just grab hold to that, you believe that they would be better able to navigate not only their current circumstances of adversity that they may be struggling with, but just adversity in general, the proper approach, the proper mindset. What would be those words of encouragement that you would have to offer?
man. Keep believing in the dream that God has given you. That would sum up the advice that I was given when I was 15 years old. God put in my heart I'd make it to the NBA, and I remember hanging out with my friends. I remember sitting on the steps. He was dribbling the balls, just hanging out. I said, "Man, I'm about to go. I'm going to the NBA." I remember them all laughing. They all laughed. They thought it was funny. And when I went through my basketball career and I fell short of that goal, I questioned that vision that God had put in me. And when I started to question that vision that God has put in me and I went away from it, that's when things in my life started going haywire. Um, but see, God, what He put on my, He was faithful because even though I didn't make the NBA as a player, He's given me the opportunity to train NBA players and work with NBA players and be in the mix of that community in that field. So when God gives us a vision, He doesn't all it usually doesn't look like the way we thought it would look, or it doesn't take us down the path that we thought it was going to take you because when God gives us a vision, what he's trying to do is let us see that the journey is more important than the destination.
Mm.
And you had said before when you was talking about my daughter and one day asking where you been. And when I left Boston, I made a decision that I was going to fully commit myself to the vision that God has given me so that I would become someone great. I wanted to get to a certain level within the game where if my daughter wanted to know where her daddy was, she can type in my name in Google and see 4 pages
Hmm.
of what I'm doing. She can go on YouTube and see 300 videos. She can go on Instagram and see daddy's verified and see all my videos. She can go to TikTok and see my stuff. You see what I'm saying? She can go into these podcasts that I'm doing. You see what I'm saying? So she can go and see what her daddy's doing and seeing how great her daddy is. So what I would tell anyone that's going through something that and you just feel like you can't win, just stay true to that vision that God's given you. Because I'm here to tell you that if you stay true, He will allow you to have your wildest dreams come true. And what He's even in the 4 months that I've been in Las Vegas, how He's elevated me, how He's put me on platforms and given me views on social media. I mean, I did a video. I went and played a basketball game. The guy asked me to come play, and I played against these young kids, and I messed around and had about 46 points on these kids. But the crazy part is these kids were these big social media basketball influencers. I just thought I was going to play a game, and I just had a really good game. The old man was hot, right? And unbeknownst to me, these kids made a whole video. Now they got about 100 million subscribers on Instagram. They made a whole video about the OG that scored almost 50 points on them, and it went viral all over the world, like 3-4 million views. It allowed me. I got a social media and marketing team for free now. I'm going to France next month to play. Going to go play in Dominican Republic, and all I did was show up for a game. See, now I can market, I can strategize, I can post on social media all day long, but I would never have got the type of exposure that I got that God orchestrated. So understand that, just trust God and just keep walking in that vision, and He will open doors that you couldn't open for yourself. He will put you in front of people that you couldn't get in front of, because the Bible said,
Mm.
"I will take the foolish things of the world to confound the wise." Here's the kid that nobody believed in, nobody supported. You see what I'm saying? Got kicked off teams, bounced around here, there, and everywhere. But yet, how did I get here? So the show, I know the title is From Man's Rejection to God's Protection, but then we can add to God's elevation
Mhm.
to that.
Yes.
So I'm the
Yes.
classic story of the underdog. So if you don't feel like you are underdog, I'm the champion. Watch my life and see what God can do, and He can do even greater things than you. Because if you can figure out who you are and the vision and stick to that vision sooner than I did, you could do twice as much as I did. I'm just here to inspire. That's all.
Well said. Well said. Absolutely, man. You spoke nothing but truth right there. Absolutely. Absolutely. So Paris, man, it has been a pleasure and an honor, a privilege to be able to chat it up with you, man, just to hear your story, your journey, dropping a lot of gems. I know I've been blessed by what you've had to share. I know my listeners are going to be blessed by what you have to share. I appreciate the transparency and the authentic way that you've done so, dealing with some very real type of things that people go through. But also showing them that, again, that doesn't mean it's got to be the end of your story, that there is a way to be able to overcome even some of the greatest of adversities. But it begins with that relationship with God. And you've definitely highlighted that, magnified that, and done so unapologetically. And for that, I appreciate that. And I know, again, people are going to be blessed in hearing and taking view of this podcast episode. Very, very powerful story. But before I let you go, as is customary here on the Blessings in the Streets podcast, man, we like to take the opportunity to love on you, to celebrate you, to acknowledge you. So if you got anything that's going on right now or coming up that you'd like to share with us, whether it be professionally or personally, please do that at this time. We want to celebrate you, man. We want to acknowledge you. What you got going on? What can people look for that's coming down the pike for you, and how can they connect with you if they're interested in some of your services that you offer?
Yeah, I mean, like I mentioned some of the stuff. I mean, God has really enlarged my territory. He's given me a lot of opportunities, not only to train, but getting back to playing. Obviously, I played in an era we didn't have no social media then, unless you was NBA or high level college basketball player. You didn't get a chance for the masses to see you. But now God He's preserved my skills to in old age and allowed me to kind of get some of that attention. Right, I got people clapping for me now, people supporting me, right? When I didn't have that. So I'm just in a season of abundance. I'm gonna be getting to some public speaking events too, and further kind of telling my story and testimony. And like I said, going out to France to play, going out to Dominican Republic, and then doing camps throughout the U.S. for the summer. So God is keeping me busy. I would love to hear from anyone that would want to reach out. If you got a basketball player, or you are a basketball player, or you just someone that going through life, right, going through the challenges of life. I like to think I'm a player development specialist. I mean, I just don't develop basketball the skills. I develop people. I think I try to use some of my life experiences to help people get through some of theirs. So if you just need to talk, I can be reached on Instagram at bballprophet. That's BBALL prophet, PROPHET. You can email me at hoopsmasters@gmail.com. That's HOOPS masters, MASTERZ, not an S at the end, is Z. That's one word, hoopmasters@gmail.com. I can be reached on YouTube at Hoopmasters TV. And on Facebook, you can reach me at PK Cherry on Facebook. So love to hear from you. Love to be a blessing. Robert, just thank you so much for having me, man. It's a blessing. Anytime I get to share these experiences, it's a blessing for others. But the Bible says when we refresh others, we ourselves refreshed. And it feels good that the pain wasn't for vain, right? It was for gain.
Mm-hmm.
And that the test can be for the testimony and the story can be God's glory. So at least, all the pain I went through wasn't just for, nothing came of it. So I wouldn't change a thing of my life. I'm very thankful for all the good and the bad. And again, just thank you for giving me the platform to tell that story.
Absolutely, man. And again, thank you for sharing the story. Thank you for accepting the invite to be a part of the podcast. It has been a pleasure. It was definitely worth waiting for us to get it all lined up. And it wasn't an accident for us to connect on social media lines like we did. And, we've now made a connection and we've established a brotherhood, a friendship, if you will. So you're definitely welcome to come back on the show anytime, man. Consider that to be an open invite to you for some other topics of discussion that I know we can delve into very easily. So I've thoroughly and enjoyed it. And for my listeners, if you've enjoyed the podcast today, you've enjoyed the content, please subscribe, please share, please like, please comment, because this is what it's all about on the Blessings in the Streets podcast. We want to inspire, we want to encourage, we want to uplift, being transparent in the sharing of stories like the ones you've heard today. Just keeping it real, being authentic, being raw, letting you know that, yes, adversity is going to come across for everybody's lives. We're going to all deal with the life storms. It's not a matter of if, but a matter of when. But when those storms hit, it doesn't mean that you have to be taken out by the storm. It doesn't mean that you have to be destroyed by the storm. It doesn't mean that it's the end of your story. It's just an opportunity. And that's the key word. You want to look at these storms as opportunities to grow, to develop, to elevate, to stretch, to be a better version of yourself so that God can use you in a magnificent, mighty way. Have you walking in your purpose, doing life the way God specifically created you to do it, and to impact the people that he is predestined for you to meet. Some you've already met and some that you're going to be meeting down the road that he's already got lined up for you to be a blessing to pour into, to uplift. And so important to have that relationship with God. And if you don't currently have that, I encourage you that today is a mighty fine day to make that happen. It'll be the best decision that you've ever made. You've heard my brother speak on his story. You've heard me speak on some things. We're not telling you something that we heard. We're telling you something that we know firsthand. God is able. He's capable. No problem is too big for him. He loves us unconditionally. He wants nothing but the best for us. So you just need to trust in that, lean into that, tap into that mustard seed of faith, and just let God be your guide, be your eyes and ears, navigating you through life storms and life's challenges, understanding that the blessings are going to be there waiting for you and for those that he's equipping you to be a blessing to. So with that said, remember the Blessings in the Streets podcast. This is the place where your story is your glory, where your relationships are relevant, and your journey is your joy. I am your host, Joseph B. Roberts. Thank you so much again for tuning in. And until next time, you keep fighting that good fight. You keep persevering. Hang in there, even in the midst of the adversity and even in the midst of the storms, because God is able and he's right there with you. He wants you to be able to withstand that because he has so much in store for you on the other end. Those storms can't come your way without him giving the green light for it to happen, but it's never to harm you. It's to grow you. It's to develop you. It's to make you be the best version of who you can be. So until next time, you take care of yourselves. Keep the faith, keep hanging on in there, and I'll look forward to seeing you on our next show. Have a good day.